Should we go back on to some of the deals?
I'd love to hear a deal story.
Careful here, Paul. Careful, Paul.
We signed a sponsor. They'd have branding on the car. If they wanted to come to the race, that was extra. If they wanted the sticker on the car, that was extra. If they wanted the table and the hospitality, that was extra. Well, you said that you registered the trademark, which I don't think you probably had. I mean, they were absolutely ballistic. If you couldn't borrow it or
Steal it. Were you going to say that they couldn't be seen to be working on a Friday at 2 o'clock because the bailiff always came at 2 o'clock on a Friday?
I mean, I don't think the corporates and the CEOs have ever been spoken to the way that Eddie spoke to them.
Well, Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I think before I let Eddie say a word, we need to know your side of the story, how you came together. You share the same name. There's no relationship, is there?
No, none at all. Just pure coincidence when I started with EJ, which is called Eddie Jordan Racing. 87, I finished working with Honda, Wayne Gardner, world champion.
On the motorbikes?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I wanted to go into cars, so I went to Eddie Jordan Racing, got the job, 87. Exactly the same time that Andy Stevenson started, who now is obviously sporting director for Aston Martin. So we started both at the same time, Formula 3 mechanics.
So you used to get your hands dirty because they're beautifully manicured now.
No, Andy did all the work. So
Exactly. I wasn't going to answer that.
Yeah, so it wasn't down to me. But Andy couldn't get up in the morning, so I was a morning person. Andy would come in at midday. I would start in the morning. And in the afternoon, I would then concentrate on... I had a second-hand car sales business in Oxford. So I would sell the cars in the afternoon while Andy did the work. But I soon realised quickly that obviously sharing the same surname as EJ, that I used his telephone number to sell some of my cars, my second-hand cars.
Are you Irish by any chance? 'Cause it sounds like a blagging situation going on here.
He's worse than that. He's worse than that. No. Anyway, anyway, go on, Paul.
It worked in my favour, and we had a lovely secretary who was quite friendly and helpful. She would take the telephone calls for the cars that I had in my car lot in Oxford. And every time I sold a car through using Eddie Jordan's number, I would give her a small commission. That was working fine, but I hadn't worked...
None for me, by the way.
You didn't know about it?
No, I didn't.
You must be one of the few that's managed to get away with that.
I think everything was going fine, but obviously when you're young, you think you're entrepreneurial. But
thief is the word, Paul.
Businessman.
What happened is that Eddie took a telephone number for somebody who wanted to buy an Austin Allegro. And obviously he didn't have an Austin Allegro to sell. So I just got this abuse. Eddie had a mezzanine on the top of the workshop, Unit 21 at Silverstone. Do you remember it, David?
Yeah.
And I just remember him shouting, I won't swear because get up in my office now. And so I went up to the office. I thought, this is it, P45. So I went into the office, sat down, and he's scribbling away, looking at me and everything. And he said, do you know what I've just had? I said, no. He said, I've had a phone call. Somebody wanted to buy an Austin Allegro. And I said, you know what? He said, I don't own Austin Allegro. So I thought, okay. So I told him the whole story. He was fairly angry, but at that time, he then had written 3 cars that he did own that he wanted me to work on and eventually sell. And that was really my opportunity. He gave me my opportunity to break into the commercial side with Jordans.
And then so you definitely confirmed that you were more in that side of the business than on the mechanicking side. And the journey continued. When we were talking off air earlier, you mentioned that Eddie might have fired you 5 or 6 times and then would then call you up and say, why are you not at work? And you go, well, you fired me yesterday. And then you go, I was only joking.
Come on, how many times was it?
10 would not be enough. 13 would probably be the maximum.
I tell you, Paul, I've had it with you. Get out of here with words. And he'd be gone down the road. I'd forget about him for about 3 or 4 days, and then I'd find out, well, where's fucking Paul Jordan? And he said, well, you sacked him. And I said, oh, get him on the phone and tell him to get back in here.
But the reason you'd sacked me, Eddie, is that I was carrying out some of your sort of duties that you asked me to do.
Duties?
Well,
Well, you were known as he was known as the bag carrier.
Well, what was in the bag, though?
I'd always complain. I was always a whinger. I'd say to Bernie, you're bringing us to Monaco. It's ridiculous. What money we're having to spend on hotels for the crew and the staff. This is absolutely nonsense. I want some compensation for this. And the flights into Nice is crazy, because I'd ferry them all down on a bus. So I'd send Paul to get the bag. So that's why he was known as the bag carrier.
Yeah. And that was on more than one occasion. But, being sacked on a regular basis, as I said, it was really Eddie's doing, asking me to do certain things. He would come back from flights, David. At one point, he got hold of a private Rolex catalogue, and he would circle every single watch on the catalogue. And the auction was at Christie's in London, and he sent me to
get down there and buy that. To go and
buy those 2 watches that he put an asterisk by his side. But he'd circled every single watch, so. I was quite pleased myself. I'd managed to buy every single watch in the collection
of the asterisk.
Of the asterisks, yeah. So I'd come out the auction, and it was £157,000 or something, which was a lot of money in 91 or whatever. Money we probably didn't have as a team. And I said, look, Eddie, it's fantastic. I've got every single watch that you wanted. And then there was just like abuse on the phone. Silence.
You're sacked.
You're sacked again. And again, 2 days later, obviously, where is PJ? So, and it's an ongoing theme, doing something for Eddie and then getting sacked. It was fantastic. I mean, it was a roller coaster. It wasn't a job. It was just pure enjoyment.
How many years did you work together?
13 years.
Wow.
Yeah. But you have to remember,
I was a softie to put up with you for 13 years.
No, but you have to remember, we were breaking into the big league. We didn't have big sponsors. We had to survive, and Eddie, through his brilliance, pulling deals that no other team would even consider. We'd sign sponsors. The really funny thing about it, we'd sign a sponsor, they'd have branding on the car, but they hadn't bought tickets in the deal. So if they wanted to come to the race, that was extra. If they wanted the sticker on the car, that was extra. If they wanted the table and the hospitality, that was extra.
Of course.
It was just
upselling,
yeah.
You go into a hotel room and the fridge is there. Yeah. If you want something out of the fridge, you pay for it, don't you?
Yeah.
Why should it be all just be a freebie?
No, but they assume that once you buy a sponsorship package, it does come with a ticket. You can come to see the car that you're sponsoring.
Yeah, well, I would have been one of those guys that assumed. But
are you a mug?
Well, clearly, and I'm not as successful as you two gentlemen. But before I think we expand a bit more on those early days, because Jordan did some. When I say Jordan, I'm conscious of the fact that you're both called Jordan, but Jordan Grand Prix really did take some risks and did some amazing stunts and ways of getting extra airtime. And is there one particular one that stands out, or a launch party or anything that you're involved in that you think, this is something special?
Well, I think there's so many, David. That's the problem. I mean, if I can go back to how we got exposure, just taking sponsors and creating opportunities that they would never have had before. So obviously the bits and hisses on the car for Benson Hedges. But I think Zoe was involved in that.
She was involved in the... Zoe. Zoe, by the way, is my eldest daughter. And Paul, I'll come back to the point that Paul is talking about, which is bitten and hisses, because she was involved in Be On Edge, where you lose a couple of the letters of Benson and Hedges, and it was circumventing the rules of the tobacco regulations, and of course they didn't like that either, and the authorities came down eventually on us. But we bought a year here and another year there. But
should we go back on some of the deals?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about?
I'd love to hear a deal story, especially because I think they might be true from you.
Should we go on to when Jordan was launched and the first Jordan Formula 1 car? You named it 911 or 91.1. Obviously, and a lot of people were referencing it. You might remember, David. A lot of people were referencing it as a 911, and obviously Porsche owned the rights to 911. So I think somebody from the Porsche board phoned Eddie and said, "You've got to stop using 91.1 or 911 because we own it." He said, "Well, it's the public, it's the media, it's calling it." So Eddie then carried on and said,
I had a row with this guy and he wasn't seeing sense. And eventually, when he knew I wasn't going to do it, there was a little bit of a trade-off. Paul, come on, tell us.
Well, you said that you registered the trademark, which I don't think you probably had. and that you'd invested all these millions in the marketing side to promote the 91.1. So I think you settled with some compensation, a free 911 for 2 years.
Turbo.
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 He probably had someone paying for the fuel as well.
Yeah, and yeah. So I mean, that's just one. And again, when we before you went into Formula One, we sold all the Formula 3000 team that we had. Eddie, was it Eddie Irvine?
Damon Hill.
Damon Hill, yeah. And so Eddie got a contract to run Barclay Cigarettes for a Formula 3000 team, but we didn't have a team. So there was another team in 3000 called Middlebridge Racing, I think. So Eddie did the deal. I think it was quite a large, substantial sponsorship deal from Barclay Cigarettes. Eddie obviously kept the lion's share of the money and gave the money.
Not true.
The rest of the money to the team. But before that, we bought all the Leyton House Formula One team equipment, the trucks, the motorhome, all the equipment within the garage, etc.
Sorry, just Paul, you better tell them that they'd gone bankrupt.
They'd gone bankrupt, yeah. So that was in 1990. They'd gone bankrupt.
That was an Adrian Newey design car, I think.
That's
the Leyton
right.
House, beautiful looking car.
Yeah.
As was the Jordan 91.1. Was a beautiful looking car.
So it was a bright blue car. Bright blue car they ran, and all the equipment obviously was painted the same. So we sold everything apart from this pretty brand new motorhome, which was obviously in the bright blue. Eddie had sold that motorhome, said it was new to the new sponsor, so Barclay Cigarettes. So we had it painted in the cream and with all the Barclay sponsors on it, which obviously was extra to paint it extra. First race was in Vallelonga, and it started to rain. So the hospitality team then got the motorhome awning out of it, which was still in the Leyton House bright blue colours with mushrooms, dead mice. I mean, they were absolutely ballistic.
The sponsors were.
Yeah, because he'd sold them a brand new motorhome, and you'd expect to have a brand new
paint it was.
Yeah, no, I don't think you said. I think you said it was a brand new.
So it was an education working for Eddie and how he would embellish the facts, or did it come naturally to you to go, well, look, this is motor racing. You've got to do what you need to do to survive.
It was to survive. Yeah, we had to do. I mean, we didn't. Everything was. We were I suppose, instructed to look at things as a deal. You know, everything had a. If you couldn't borrow it or
steal it. Were you going to say
steal it? Then you didn't have it. You know, so it taught you a good lessons on how to survive. You know, so that was the makings.
It was fun.
Yeah, there wasn't. It wasn't. Say there was not a day that wasn't enjoyable.
We were very lucky a few episodes ago to have Bertrand Gachot join us in London, and I've known Bertrand since before I was in Formula One. And then he's gone off and had great success in business. But it was really fascinating for me to see him sort of reunite with Eddie and reminisce over a period, which was difficult for the Jordan team, was difficult for Eddie and, of course, for Bertrand. But it was fantastic for me to see how he's moved on and he's matured into this next phase of his life. And Eddie's been very helpful with his daughter, Grace, who's a brilliant singer. If you haven't listened to her, you should check her out on YouTube. Absolutely fantastic. Have you got any memories from that phase, the transition, Michael Schumacher coming on board, Eddie wheeling and dealing, or were you just focused on the partners and sponsors?
No, I mean, I think I was sent to do certain jobs that Eddie didn't want to get involved in, you know. I mean, on certain occasions, he would put me in he said, look, you're a very important sponsor to us, so I'm going to have my son come and look after you, you know. So there were certain occasions.
Sons. He was my son adopted when I needed him.
Yeah, so
he got 13 years working with a nice little touch every time. He earned very well.
Yeah, we were looked after. And to be honest, even in the very bad days, David, and you know about racing, all the staff were always paid first.
Yeah, that's one thing, Eddie, to your credit. I've never heard anyone say that you didn't take care of your employees. I've heard lots of people say he might have left a bar bill or something. And you're
pretty dining good. Out on that, aren't you, David? You met some idiot who's an absolute liar, flake. He gave you some cock and bull story in Dublin, and you're living out on this.
Eddie, you were going to the butcher shop in Toaster and asked for free meat.
No, what I did, actually, that's not quite true. What I did do was I did a deal with the corner shop that I would give them cartons of cigarettes to offset against the grocery bills for the week. But that's fair enough. That's trading.
That's barter.
Yeah, and then we would take Silverstone in the old days, David. There was a cafe in the middle. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do.
And
Absolutely.
Diane used to work. Remember Diane?
Gorgeous.
So
Diane.
we used to. He instructed me to go and get the old food to sell it to the farmer to get free eggs.
Yeah, David, I don't remember that, and I'm not admitting to any of that. Please move on. This is getting ridiculous.
Well, I can believe it, though.
But anyway, no. You know what's funny about it? We always used to have Jordan parties, and I think it was indicative. If you remember, even in '98 with the Damon Hill success in Spa, we put every single member of staff on a bus. And I'm not sure other teams did that. I mean, I'm talking about everyone was entitled to go. And for me, the staff was everything because I embraced them. They knew how difficult it was, and they knew when I had money that they got some of it, and when I didn't have the money, I never put them in the promised land. I always went out to other people to borrow it or to be responsible for it, but everyone got paid. And I think that was something, that's why when I went eventually with David here in 2008, and when they asked me to go and do BBC, I was able to go to every motorhome because all the ex-staff were sort of littered around Formula One and various teams, but no one could ever say, you left me short, you screwed me, I never got paid, because everyone did get paid.
You always looked after the staff. I remember at the end of 1991, which was a difficult year for you, I remember. You laid on a concert. You got Chris Rea down to play a private concert for the whole team. You know, Eddie did good things for the team.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, to be fair, his credit, and he's not 100% well, and we wish him every success in getting himself back in shape. But Chris Rea embraced that because certainly no money changed hands. Chris Rea was a most unbelievably good guy to the Jordan team.
But there was always a deal.
Yeah.
Even 91 in the first year, the passes that you used to have to get into Silverstone were paper, not electronic. So Eddie asked me to...
Careful here, Paul. Careful, Paul.
I think we all used to get up to this in the passage.
photocopy that you colour and just sell them on the gate.
Sell, give. Paul,
No, we sold them, Eddie, because you needed some cash.
No, but please,
But
Paul,
you kept the team alive. I'm not going to give you a hard time for the past because we forgive, don't we? Forgiveness is one of the...
Well, the problem was, we all say, there's no point being a bankrupt hero. And there's also another thing. You don't want to be the richest man in the graveyard. What you need to do is to have fun and be respectful and to do whatever you can do and stretch everything out to make sure it happens. But 91 was a really difficult year, if you remember, when the bailiffs, I mean, we used to have to hide. That they couldn't be seen to be working on a Friday at 2 o'clock because the bailiff always came at 2 o'clock on a Friday. And once it came to 2:30, they could pick up tools again. But, you know, they were you just knew what the game was, didn't you?
Yeah, they were hard days, but enjoyable days.
So back in the day, I think the teams take well over $1 billion which is distributed depending on success. Where would it have been when you were running Jordan? Would it be half of that was split between the teams?
We
or
were lucky to get
fraction?
5 or 6 million.
There were different columns that you got paid from Mr. Ecclestone's formula. Which I never. You probably know it better than me how it's calculated.
Yeah, but he used to take most of it back, probably rightly so, because it was all given. It was front loaded to me because there was always a need for cash to survive. So he would say, "Look, there's 2 million or 3 million," but he would take it out of the. But what I didn't agree with him was that there was a 10% interest charge. You know, Bernie is Bernie. He hasn't got to where he is by being soft. But at the same time, I couldn't have survived without him. So who's the evil there? There's no evil. Bernie did what he was able to do, and he always said, Jordan, I'll support you because you were trying and that you want it to happen. Whereas a lot of other teams, unfortunately, fell by the wayside, and he did nothing to help them because he didn't think they deserved the help, or he didn't think by helping them it would make the slightest bit of difference.
Yeah, but the three of us are sat here today because of Mr. E, of what he did for the sport. You know, there. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the little telegram that he gave me, which he gave to every driver when they won their first Grand Prix, which was a little silver telegram that said, congratulations, stop, which I guess is how they used to do it in telegrams. You're no longer a virgin. stop because I'd won my first race. So he had a good sense of humour. He always his Christmas cards were always something slightly controversial. And I think there was once where he donated £1 million to the Labour Party. And he probably donated £1 million to the Conservatives and whoever else was a party at that time to keep everyone happy. And then somehow it came out in the media as to whether it was all done in the correct manner. And the Christmas card that year had a £1 million note, obviously a fake, that went inside as if, you used to get money in your Christmas cards from your auntie or whatever. Yeah. So everyone got one of those. So he definitely had a sense of humour for that sort of thing. The sport's popularity is bigger than it's ever been. We've come up through grassroots. Is there an element of us reminiscing on, it was a lot of fun in our day, or do you think that this generation will do exactly the same in 20 years' time or 30 years' time? Or are we basically saying that we're growing as a global sport, but at a cost? We got away with a lot of fun.
Yeah, different times, different situation. When we were young coming into the sport, it was how it was and we had to survive. Now, the goalposts have moved, it's corporate. So the people coming into it are used to what it is now. We'll talk about, what we did when we were in the sport. When you were driving, David, it's that's our moment, and now it's the moment of how it is in the sport. So I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's the amount of technology that the sport has now compared to what we had when we were in it, and we thought then we were breaking ground in terms of the technology. Sequential gearboxes. I mean, carbon.
I think it would only be right, given your 13-year stretch working with Eddie and your lifelong, clearly, friendship, that you get the closing moment here of our discussion. Is there something you've always wanted to clarify or set Eddie straight on? Or is there, obviously, remember, we're a family show here, so you've got to keep it clean. Is there one more little insight? Because I know you must have hundreds of stories. Give us one little nugget.
David, that's a tricky one. Put me on the spot there. Eddie, you say. I mean, what's a moment that you remember back in the early days? I mean,
there was a couple of guys. I remember you being very friendly with Ian Phillips, who was my commercial director. He was the head of. Without him, I couldn't have really survived because we were Bill and Ben, and I used to have very sore ankles at meetings with him because he used to keep kicking me to shut up, and then I'd kick him back, and he'd think of a scam. And honestly, he was very clever. Honestly, he used to come up with it. But Paul and him were joined together, and whenever I'd be upset with Paul, he'd run off to Ian Phillips for support. And when I'd sack him, Ian would come back and say to me, "Listen, you made a mistake there. Bring him back here and stop messing about." So that's how that sort of thing happened. But the overriding thing which Paul was there for was, we were very supportive of each other. If there was somebody ill or somebody not well, or the team was so important. I grew up in Ireland where family was everything, and this was my extended family. I thought that Jordan Grand Prix, yes, but it was Eddie Jordan Racing. When I sent you off to run a team in France, if you remember, in '87, and we nearly won that championship, and we really paid little or no attention to it, but it was a nice little earner. And I remember we had a team in Nogaro, and very soon after that, actually, France was very good to me. And that was very good for me. I won the French Grand Prix. I won the race in Le Mans. I won in Pau. I won in Le Chat. And I won in Nogaro. And actually, can you imagine? They made me a musketeer.
Yeah.
So they made me a musketeer.
What does that actually entail?
No, I don't know. It's like you were MBE or OBE.
Oh, okay. So the French government recognised you for the success of the racing.
But I won the French Grand Prix then after that in Magny-Cours.
Yeah.
So there was Jordan was very lucky in France. I don't know why that was.
Yeah. I think what I say last, David, what I always remember is that when Eddie was negotiating, whatever, say it was in dollars, whatever was the higher of the currency, he would, and so the sponsor say, it was dollars, and then he'd say, no, it was, I meant euros. So whatever was the highest, whatever deal we could get, more money out of the sponsor. That's what he did.
You're not doing me any favours.
No, but
that's good business, though. That's entrepreneurial.
Of course, it's not dollars. We're in Italy. We're in Ireland. We're in England. Whatever. It's in pounds. I think.
But you used to say to them, you would fleece them. I mean, I don't think the corporates and the CEOs had ever been spoken to the way that Eddie spoke to them. I'm going to fleece you.
I'm going to take your pants down and I'm going to
to
fleece you. And they all laughed and joked about it. And of course, I'm saying, well, you may be laughing and joking, but it is going to happen.
They loved
and
it.
then they loved it, but
They loved
because
it.
no one ever spoke to them
No.
like that.
No.
But that's an affectionate love or abuse. I don't know what it was, but I used to really. That's how I spoke to them, and they were never ever been dealt with like that before. But they kind of swallowed it.
As long as they paid. Well, they got the Jordan experience, and I've got to say, I've thoroughly enjoyed having the double Jordan squared experience. Paul, thank you very much for coming and joining us here on the podcast. Eddie, wow, a Jordan who actually just sticks to script. Well, not that he's scripted, but, a Jordan that actually seems to, dot the I's and cross the T's. This has been really enlightening for me.
I'm very relieved. I'm very relieved because Paul knows an awful lot more than what he just said there, and I'm very pleased that this is over and that I've escaped, more or less.
Well, look, let's go. We've got a little pub just around the corner. Why don't we go there, have a little pint, and I can share some of the stories with our listeners next time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Paul,
Thank
you're
you,
still
David.
on your guard. Thank you, Paul. I'm very pleased that you came. I haven't seen you for such an age. And I remember, can I tell you a story about Paul? Because I never
I actually have one story about David, actually.
Okay, so my mother loved him, and Eileen, God rest her,
Bless him.
and they had a great little relationship going. And my mother loved his girlfriend until she found out.
She was Irish.
She's Irish.
Reese was Irish, yeah.
Yeah, I was Irish too. She found out that he was living with this girl outside of marriage. And she lost it. She lost it. She didn't like Paul Jordan anymore after that. God, Eddie, what's going on here? So she was old school.
Well, you've got to test the car before you can't
Paul,
just...
I don't need to hear your diagnosis on all of this kind of relationships. But anyway, you've got a story on David.
Just
I'd
a
love
quick
to
one,
hear.
David. So I think Benetton had a Formula 3000 team, which they stopped racing. I bought all the equipment when I was still working for EJ as a private deal. And I think I sold Henny Vollenberg the first 3000 car that when you ran. So
Yeah, well, that was Vortex, and it was run by Ronnie Meadows, who is now the sporting director at Mercedes.
Yeah.
So, and Ronnie's obviously had a great deal of success with that role. But that was, I guess it was that team that Ronnie ran there. It was a little bit like the Jordan spirit. It was a bit hand to mouth in that we didn't have the full budget, but we turned up at the first race and got a podium, which was a big result for the team back then. But we're all joined in motorsport.
I thought he was going to say we're all Jordan, and I'm saying I was going to say joined instead of Jordan.
No, we're all joined together by FFS.
Wow.
Thank you, listeners.